Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m. in Brussels, and I think it's something like 5 p.m. in the Philippines. So, good afternoon to all those who are listening to us from the Philippines. I'm organizing right now an Instagram live event with Sarah Elago, who is a member of parliament in the Philippines, and I hope she will join us in a second. For those of you who don't know Sarah Elago, and that's totally fine, Sarah is the youngest member of parliament in the Philippines, and last year she has been victim to a lot of toxic, sexist propaganda, and I hope she will join me in a second so that she can share her experience. She's by far not the only victim of this kind of harassment. I have been a victim as well, and I know many of my colleagues in the European Parliament, but for example also many women parliamentarians across the Middle East who I am working with. Perfect. So I see Sarah is watching us. I hope she's just going to send me a request to join in a second so I can make her part of the discussion. Sarah, I hope this works out for you. Yes, there she goes.
There you are. Hi.
Hi, Hannah. Hello, everyone.
Good to see you. I think I move a bit farther away so one can see me completely. Hi. So I guess now we can start. It's 5 p.m. in Manila, right? So it's already late afternoon.
Yes, it's late afternoon. And good morning to all who have joined you there.
So maybe just briefly for the introduction. So I'm Hannah Neumann. So for all the Filipina viewers, I'm a member of the European Parliament for 2.5 years now. We are having midterms at the moment. And I have been working, I think, since I'm 20, so that's 17 years on the Philippines. I'm, by the way, an Ateneo alumna, so I have been studying at Ateneo for a while. I've been working on the Philippines on my PhD, but also since I'm here in the European Parliament. And one thing we did about 1.5 years ago was an urgency resolution on the human rights situation in the Philippines. And I have had quite a number of, let's say, hate speech and smear campaigns in the internet before, but the one that happened after this one, it was unimaginable even to me. I have to admit I was surprised also about how coordinated this attack was, and frankly said, it was the first time I was happy I could just close my laptop and I was sure I wasn't in the Philippines. And this experience made me look a bit further into the kind of hate speech and smear campaigns happening in the Philippines. And that's why I also decided I asked Sarah Elago if she wants to partner with me in the European Parliament Solidarity program with the members of parliament, because Sarah you're not just the youngest member of parliament in the Philippines, but especially last year, you have been the target of incredible hate speech and smear campaigns, disinformation campaigns in the internet. And we both together decided that we want to raise more awareness about this topic that does not just target you and me, but many of my colleagues in the European Parliament, in EU Parliament, but I also work with a lot of women parliamentarians in the Middle East, for example, who even if they just dare to run for parliament, already see themselves confronted with toxic, sexist attacks. For you, I know it has been mostly fake images, fake quotes, but also attacks against your family, which I know is very emotional. I actually wanted to visit the Philippines prior to the next elections to raise awareness about this issue, but quarantine regulations, which are very strict in the Philippines, make this impossible. So now Insta Live has to do it for us. Welcome, Sarah, and maybe you want to just start introducing yourself or adding something with a few words before we go into the discussion.
All right. Thank you, Hannah. Again, hello, everyone. I'm joining you here from the Philippines. I'm a member of Congress representing a youth sectoral party. Thank you for hosting this Insta Live. I hope you, your family, your constituents, loved ones all had a safe and great holidays. For us here in the Philippines, we're holding up well. and making efforts to stay safe and stay strong as we continue to stop the surge of the number of new COVID-19 cases as the spread and the spread of the Omicron variant. It has also been extra difficult beginning of the new year for so many communities that were hit by a destructive typhoon just before 2021 ended. And so in the past few weeks, we saw various relief initiatives to bring food, clean up roads from debris, among other community relief and youth-led action. There are also renewed calls to demand climate action, protect the rights of the most affected peoples in areas by extreme weather events, and of course, defend human rights, climate, and environmental defenders. So our topic today is indeed very urgent and necessary, especially now when smear campaigns and disinformations are used to sow fear, to sow division among the people, and also to cover up abuse, negligence, or incompetence of authorities.
Maybe one thing that, at least for me, is different from the kind of smear campaigns and disinformation that we face to the one that's happening in the Philippines is that often it's even kind of authorized or put in place by people who work in the military, who work in the police, who would actually, you think, be there to protect state institutions, but by this kind of disinformation undermine it. Maybe you want to share some of your personal experience, especially of the last year.
As I've shared earlier, our constituents are the young people. Youth and students, they're very vocal and outspoken on their opposition and criticism, and it's their right to engage. It's their right to speak up on these issues affecting them. They have been very vocal in their opposition to the drug war killings, corruption, abuse of power, attacks on press freedom and journalists, and other violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms. So they are increasingly being targeted and singled out through harassment and other attacks against this youth representation, including heavily propagated social media posts containing false claims, fabricated statements, and red tagging, which have all been linked as
just one thing, Sarah. Red tagging for the non-Filipinos, red tagging means to say someone is a terrorist or a communist, because it's a word that's common in the Philippines, I know, but no one here knows it. So just a brief explainer, but now continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes. But all these quotes, it's very difficult because it has been found and reported by Facebook as linked with coordinated inauthentic behavior to about 100 of police and military pages, which were all taken down last year in September last year. We filed several resolutions to investigate all these state-backed disinformation campaigns against not just me as a youth representative, but those who are frequently targeted are members of the opposition and outspoken organizations and networks here in the Philippines. So not only do these baseless accusations online violate our right to due process, these false claims also incite hate and the harm that puts our representation and membership at the risk of discrimination, hostility. So right now, there is no immediate relief and redress for the irreparable damage caused by all the stigma, harassment, and violation of rights. Worse, the same false accusations which have been repeatedly dismissed before courts are now being brought before our Commission on Elections to disqualify or delist our youth sectoral party as an accredited party list in the upcoming elections from May 2022. And across the ASEAN region, as you've also shared earlier, we've noted and reported how female members of Congress and parliamentarians, including myself, are often at the receiving end of misogynistic threats and harassment to intimidate and discredit us, to undermine our work as parliamentarians. So we have to really counter all these smear campaigns and disinformation because we cannot be passive. We cannot ignore all these disinformation campaigns, especially those that are sponsored by public resources, by government money. And so we must exhaust all means to hold all these sources, content creators, and architects of disinformation accountable.
But I mean, it's such a waste of energy that you could use to, for example, help survivors of the typhoon or protect the climate, but you spend it on just combating fake info, fake news and disinformation. You said that systematically it's women that are being targeted and the youth movement. One question that I'm also faced with a lot. So when a young woman asks me, should I enter into politics? I always have like two answers. One is, yes, please, we need you. And the other one is, I also feel kind of obliged to tell her what she signs up to, including this harassment and fake news. And I find it difficult to balance. How do you deal with that? So if a young woman asks you, shall I do that? And what would be the advice you give her?
To me, it's really important to let them know that they can run in parliament or in public position, and they must be supported and empowered, especially those coming from the most marginalized or underprivileged backgrounds via scholarships and various financial assistance to broaden their opportunities, to develop their talents and their potentials in public service. We also have to look beyond numbers. Yes, we need more women in public office, but we need more women who are standing up and speaking up for women. And so we also have to look at their position on various issues. We have to continue to engage, work with, and alongside them in developing various programs to truly empower women and ensure that no one is being left behind.
But do you have the impression that these kind of disinformation campaigns, they make women shy away from having this public office, or do you find ways to mitigate this?
It definitely has an impact, not just on the individual being targeted, but on society as a whole. It has a chilling effect, not just on us parliamentarians, because the attack is not just on our person, not just on our position, but on the interest of the people we represent. And so the challenge is really for us to stick together and let our fellow, we are, even though we're far apart from each other, literally, but we are fighting this cause with each other as we aim to increase women, genuine women, and youth representation in our parliaments.
I think that's a very important point that we are also trying to raise here in the European Union, that on this issue, we really need to stick together across party lines, because it's not a party politics issue, but it's to defend democracy and the right for everyone to be represented, to represent themselves and be outspoken in democracy. I just wonder, because the situation is different in the Philippines, with somehow the state institutions being involved in this kind of disinformation campaigns, what are the tactics or the methods that you use to still protect yourself and you support amongst each other?
Well, how we counter disinformation and smear campaign actually depends on identifying and understanding the sources of this disinformation, because we have to differentiate our response based on whether these sources or networks are state or non-state actors. When public resources are being used and exploited to spread disinformation, then we must, by all means, engage with civil society, as many organizations and individuals as possible, to counter this smear campaigns and disinformation, especially in these times that we're in. Still, we're far from resolving and ending the pandemic because of so much resources and efforts, measures lacking to effectively combat the spread of COVID-19 and stop the spread of the Omicron variant. Information can save lives. It can also help in combating vaccine hesitancy. So that's how important information is to democracy, to encouraging people to cooperate, to inspiring people and empowering them to work together to for all of us to emerge from this multi-layered crisis. One thing also is how important information is in empowering communities to address the planetary emergency. Since we're in the Philippines, one that is so vulnerable to extreme weather events. And in all these, the critical significance of empowering people to raise their voices, to raise all their issues, their situation, other interests, so that we, as a representative, can ensure that we add our voices to the voices of so many sectors who are already speaking up and fighting for their rights here in the Philippines. So, in my opinion, what is necessary in any response to counter smear campaigns and disinformation is to first and foremost continue showing up, continue actively working as a member of Congress, step up your campaign to present and promote your representation, what you stand for as a member of Parliament or Congress. There are times when you can also respond by not acknowledging what is thrown at you and expressly saying that you will not dignify someone who smears and lies with a response. But in identifying and understanding the sources of this information, especially those that are state-sponsored, we must really exhaust all means to hold them accountable and end the culture of impunity. Because once we, stop making effort to counter all these, then what they can do, what they can throw at a member of parliament, it can be easily done against any citizen of our country.
I took away a lot of points from you on this one. The first one was kind of showing up. So, I mean, just standing your claim and continuing your work irrespective of what happens. The second one is speaking up and holding the perpetrators accountable as far as this is possible. And we know it's harder to do that in the social sphere as it is in real life. But I also think solidarity is something important. At least for me, when there were these concerted attacks, I was very happy to have people speaking up, either inside social media or just sending me a text and saying, well, we see this, we are sorry, and we stand by your side. To share one experience of a civil society initiative that we have in Germany that I found very useful in support is an organization, it's called Hate Aid. And I made use of their services because what they do is whenever there is a kind of a campaign, I allow them to take over my social media channels. So they clean up the mess and they document what is a clear violation of the law. And they file lawsuits for me because if you do that yourself, it eats up so much time and you really need to read all that shit, which I refuse to do by now. And so they document it, they file the lawsuit. And when someone in the lawsuit gets punished, for example, by paying a fine, the fine goes directly to them. And that's how they finance themselves and they become like the police of the internet. I mean, it would be perfect if state institutions would do that, but to some degree it's impossible for them, and maybe I would not hand them over my social media accounts. But I think that is a very, very good civil society initiative to at least mitigate. But we need to get to the roots of, I mean, first of all, violence against women, online as well as offline, but also deal with the platforms that still allow for this to happen. One last question to you, and then I think you can ask me questions, but also, of course, our audience can, in the comment section, put in some questions. One of the persons in the Philippines that has been very outspoken, but also a huge target of disinformation is Maria Ressa. By the way, I had one of my last Insta lives with her, and now she has been given the Nobel Peace Prize. And in her laureate speech, she was also outspoken on that very same issue. Do you think the Nobel Peace Prize to Maria Ressa is changing something in the Philippines or even globally on this issue?
I think it sends a strong message that on the importance of the work a journalist do, and how important it is for us, for all of us, to stand up for media freedom, to uphold press freedom anywhere, everywhere. It's critical and key to a democratic, to upholding our democratic values. And we cannot let any attack to trample on media freedom in our countries. It also inspires a lot of young people, you know, in not just the Philippines, but in many parts of the world, to speak up and to also lend and add their voice to upholding press freedom and protecting the work of journalists in their countries. Since reporting the truth is important in ensuring that we are holding our public officials, the authorities, accountable. And that's how we're also empowered to make informed decisions on various issues, especially in our country with the 2022 elections just around the corner. It's critical for reviewing the track record, the positions of all the aspiring candidates from the highest position in the land down to our leaders in the barangay level, our a basic unit of governance here in the Philippines. So that's really one. But I know Maria Ressa and all who are working for protecting the work of our journalists and upholding media freedom knows all too well that there's so much more to be done in order to fight for justice and accountability for all victims of extrajudicial killings, especially among journalists and media workers, to end the climate of impunity, to ensure that they are able to do their important jobs without fear of reprisal, without fear of without fearing for their safety as they perform their important jobs.
Let's hope that things will get better, but I think we should try to continue our Insta lives maybe once a month until the elections, because I have to admit I'm as much as I hope for it not to be that way, but I'm not too optimistic that things will improve until the elections. So in the comment sections, everything we got so far is people being very, very admirable of your work, Sarah, but no questions. So just feel free to turn the table and ask me a few things if you feel like it.
Yes, Hannah, we're also interested in how you have managed so far, in countering smear campaigns and disinformation as it affects our work or your work as a parliamentarian in the European Parliament.
Well, I mean, the first thing is the big difference. So here we have these smear campaigns, but it doesn't come from state sources. So sometimes it's the right wing, sometimes it's sexists, even slightly journalists. Or people who call themselves journalists, who run these attacks. But most of us still feel kind of protected by the state institutions. So we can turn there, we can ask for these legal lawsuits to happen, and we still have some confidence that it's done in a good and right manner, as good as they can. One thing that clearly helped me is this hate aid organization, as I said, just to manage to manage everything that happens when you are in a shitstorm. The second thing is really solidarity amongst us parliamentarians. A lot of solidarity also from our male colleagues, I have to say, because our male colleagues are very aware that we are targeted in a different way. We are trying to work with the platforms more and more, Facebook and others, to see how they can become part of the solution. For example, identifying the people that post these kind of threats, but also making it more and more impossible that this is being posted. We know, for example, from Facebook, the more controversial something is, the more clicks they are, the more reach they have, the more advertising they can sell. But this is a business model we don't want to allow anymore. So something like the Digital Service Act, which is currently under negotiation in the European Union, wants to target this and have more strict regulations for the online platforms, as we have it for journals. In journals, like official print journals or television, they really get into trouble if they say such things. And we need to have kind of the same rules for social media. That's something we are working for a lot. We are trying to establish more organizations like Hate Aid to help the victims so they don't feel alone, and to combat impunity. I don't know if that's going to be enough, to be frank, but I think it's the first steps we have to take. Of course, we are, and for example, the Interparliamentary Union is also doing surveys so that we have a better base of information. And there are a lot of female colleagues, more than half. I think it's about 2/3 even in the European Union that face these kind of harassments. And very few report it because it's a lot of work, also because sometimes you're ashamed. And what really bothers me most is when these attacks also go to family members or friends. Because for me, I signed up to this and I kind of knew what I signed up for, although I don't think this is how it should be, but they didn't. And I really think there we need to draw a super strict line.
Yes. And thank you for highlighting the importance of getting organized in order to counter disinformation also systematically. Working with media outlets and credible information sources really helps bolster all efforts to combat disinformation and defend the truth. Likewise, we have high hopes in building solidarity, since we're indeed stronger in solidarity. With this, we hope that we can overcome, and we can emerge from this crisis together, and continue the work of those before us who have long fought for the fundamental freedoms and rights we have today.
Thank you so much for your time, Sarah, today. I hope we can continue that. Just one question, will you be running again for the next elections?
For the next elections, our party list will be running again, but I won't be the first nominee anymore of the party list representation, since we have an age requirement for a youth sectoral party, only up to 30 years old on the date of the election. So here, the maximum of term per representative is up to 3 terms. But in the case of our youth sectoral party, it's only up to 2 terms, since because of the age requirement. But we will continue the work for youth empowerment as always. So we'll still see, more of each other to those who are watching and listening us.
That's very good to know. So now we just continue until the election with our little program, and then I'm excited to learn in what other function you are going to support this cause maybe next time. Thanks so much, Sarah, for your time. See you soon. Stay healthy and stay safe, and as everyone else who has been following us today.
Likewise, thank you, Hannah. And we hope to our listeners and to all who are watching us live, you can continue supporting our bid to promote the rights of human rights defenders through the passage of the Human Rights Defenders Bill, our academic freedom bills, and our measures to support critical media and digital literacy in our education system. And we hope we can continue working with you, MEP Hannah, on this regard. Thank you so much. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Bye.